Introduction to culture. The English word culture is derived from the Latin term cult or cultus, meaning tilling or cultivating or refining and worship. In some cases, it means cultivating and refining a thing to such an extent that its end product evokes our admiration and respect. This is practically the same as Sanskriti of the Sanskrit language. The term Sanskriti has been derived from the root kri, that means to do, of Sanskrit language. 3 words come from this root: kri, that is prakriti, basic matter or condition; Sanskriti, that is refined matter or condition; and vikriti, that is modified or decayed matter or condition. When prakriti or a raw material is refined, it becomes Sanskriti. Culture is a way of life. The food that you eat, the clothes that you wear, the language you speak, and the God you worship, all are aspects of culture. In very simple terms, we can say that culture is the embodiment of the way in which we think and do things. It is also the things that we have inherited as members of society. All the achievements of human beings as members of social groups can be called culture. Now, what do we imbibe? We take in the art that is around us, the music that we hear, the literature, the architecture that we see around in our cities and towns, the sculpture, philosophy, religion that we follow, and the sciences can be seen as aspects of culture. However, culture also includes the customs that we follow, the traditions that we imbibe, the festivals that we celebrate, ways of living, and one's outlook on various issues of life. Culture thus refers to a human made environment which includes all the material and non-material products of group life that are transmitted from one generation to the next generation. There is a general agreement among social scientists that culture consists of explicit and implicit patterns of behavior acquired by us human beings. These may be transmitted through symbols constituting the distinctive achievements of human groups, including their embodiment as artifacts. The essential core of culture thus lies in those finer ideas which are transmitted within a group, both historically derived as well as selected with their attached value. More recently, culture denotes historically transmitted patterns of meanings embodied in symbols by means of which people communicate, perpetuate, and develop their knowledge about and express their attitudes towards life. Culture is the expression of our nature in our modes of living and thinking. It may be seen in our literature, in religious practices, in recreation and enjoyment. Culture has 2 distinctive components, namely material and non-material. Material culture consists of objects that are related to the material aspect of our life, such as our dress, household goods. Non-material culture refers to ideas, thoughts, and beliefs. Culture varies from place to place and country to country. its development is based on the historical process operating in a local, regional or national context. For example, we differ in our ways of greeting others. Some will say Namaste, some will say Walaikum Salam. We also have differences in clothing, our food habits, social and religious customs and practices. In other words, the people of any country are characterized by their distinctive and cultural traditions. The word culture and civilization are often used synonymously. However, they have clearly defined meanings, differentiating them. Civilization means having better ways of living and sometimes making nature bend to fulfill their needs. It also includes organizing societies into politically well defined groups working collectively for improved conditions of life in matters of food, dress, communication, and so on. Thus, some groups consider themselves as civilized and look down upon others. This position of certain groups has even led to wars and holocausts, resulting in mass destruction of human beings. On the other hand, culture refers to the inner being, a refinement of head and heart. This includes arts, sciences, music, dance, and various higher pursuits of human life, which are often classified as cultural activities. One who may be poor and wearing cheap clothes may be considered uncivilized, but still he or she may be the most cultured person. One possessing ostentatious wealth may be considered as civilized, but not be cultured. As we have seen, culture is the higher levels of inner refinement of a human being. Humans are not merely physical beings. They live and act at three levels, that is physical, mental and spiritual. While better ways of living socially and politically and better utilization of nature around us may be termed as civilization. This is not enough to be cultured. Only when the deeper level of a person's intellect and consciousness are brought into expression can we call them cultured. Now, cultural development is a historical process. Our ancestors learnt many things from their predecessors. With the passage of time, they also added to it from their own experience and gave up those which they did not consider useful. We, in turn, have learnt many things from our ancestors. As time goes on, we continue to add newer thoughts, newer ideas to those already existent, and sometimes we give up some which we do not consider useful anymore. This is how culture is transmitted and carried forward from generation to the next generation. The culture we inherit from our predecessors is called our cultural heritage. This heritage exists at various levels. Heritage as a whole has inherited a culture which may be called human heritage. A nation also inherits a culture which may be termed as national cultural heritage. Cultural heritage includes all those aspects or values of culture transmitted to human beings by their ancestors from generation to generation. They are cherished, protected and maintained by them with unbroken continuity, and they feel proud of it. A few examples would be helpful in clarifying the concept of heritage. For example, the Taj Mahal, Swaminarayan Temple of Gandhinagar and Red Fort of Agra, Delhi's Qutub Minar, Mysore Palace, Jain Temple of Dilwara in Rajasthan, Nizamuddin Aulia's Dargah in Delhi, Golden Temple of Amritsar, Gurdwara Sisganj of Delhi, Sanchi Stupa, Christian churches in Goa, India Gate, etc. are all important places of our heritage and are to be protected by all means. Besides, the architectural creations, monuments, material artifacts, the intellectual achievements, philosophy, treasures of knowledge, scientific inventions and discoveries are also the part of heritage. In Indian context, the contributions of Bodhayan, Aryabhat, Bhaskaracharya in the field of mathematics, astronomy and astrology, Kannad and Varamihir in the field of physics, Nag Arjun in the field of chemistry, Susrut and Charak in the field of medicine, and Patanjali in the field of yoga are profound treasures of Indian cultural heritage. Culture is liable to change, but our heritage does not. We individuals belonging to a culture or a particular group may acquire or borrow certain cultural traits of other communities, cultures, but our belongingness to Indian cultural heritage will remain unchanged. Our Indian cultural heritage will bend us together, that is, Indian literature and scriptures, namely Vedas, Upanishads, Gita and Yoga system have contributed a lot by way of providing right knowledge, right action, behavior and practices as complementary to the development of civilization. Now, let us see what are the general characteristics of culture. Culture is learned and acquired. Culture is acquired in the sense that there are certain behaviors which are acquired through heredity. Individuals inherit certain qualities from their parents, but socio-cultural patterns are not inherited. These are learnt from family members, from the group and the society in which we all live. It is thus apparent that the culture of human beings is influenced by the physical and social environment through which they operate. Secondly, culture is shared by a group of people. A thought or action may be called culture if it is shared and believed or practiced by a group of people. Culture is cumulative. Different knowledge embodied in culture can be passed from one generation to another generation. More and more knowledge is added in the particular culture as the time passes us by. Each may work out solutions to problems in life that passes from one generation to another. This cycle remains as the particular culture goes with time. Culture changes. There is knowledge, thoughts or traditions that are lost as new cultural traits are added. There are possibilities of cultural changes within the particular culture as time passes. Finally, culture is also dynamic. No culture remains on the permanent state. Culture is changing constantly, thereby modifying or changing the old ways. This is the characteristics of culture that stems from the culture's cumulative quality. Culture also gives us a range of permissible behavior patterns. It involves how an activity should be conducted, how an individual should act appropriately. Culture is diverse. It is a system that has several mutually independent parts. Although these parts are separate, they are interdependent with one another, forming culture as a whole. Culture is ideational. Often it lays down an ideal pattern of behavior that are expected to be followed by individuals so as to gain social acceptance from the people with the same culture. It is also important to see why culture is important to human life. Culture is closely linked with life. It is not an add-on, an ornament that we can wear, use and throw. It is not merely a touch of color. It is what makes us human. Without culture, there would be no humans. Culture is made up of traditions, beliefs, way of life, from the most spiritual to the most material. It gives us meaning, a way of leading our lives. Human beings are creators of culture, and at the same time, culture is what makes us human. A fundamental element of culture is the issue of religious belief and its symbolic expression. We must value religious identity and be aware of current efforts to make progress in terms of interfaith dialogue, which is actually an intercultural dialogue. As the world is becoming more and more global and we coexist on a more global level, we can't just think there's only one right way of living or that any one is valid. The need for coexistence makes the coexistence of culture and beliefs necessary. In order to not make such mistakes, the best thing we can do is to get to know about others' culture also, while also getting to learn our own. How can we deal with other cultures if we don't really know what our own culture is? The three eternal and universal values of truth, beauty, and goodness are closely linked with culture. It is culture that brings us closer to truth through philosophy and religion. It brings beauty in one's lives through the arts and makes us aesthetic beings, and it is culture that makes us ethical beings by bringing us closer to the values of love, tolerance, and peace. Now, let us sum up the important aspects of culture. It's easy for you to understand what culture is really. Culture has been derived from the Latin term cult or cultus. Sanskriti is derived from Sanskrit text kri, meaning to do. Culture may be defined as the way an individual and especially a group live, think, feel, and organize themselves, celebrate, and share life. Culture has different characteristics. It can be acquired, lost, or shared. It is cumulative, it is dynamic, diverse, and gives us a range of permissible behavior pattern. It can change. Culture includes both material and non-material components. In deeper sense, it is culture that produces the kind of literature, music, dance, sculpture, architecture, and various other art forms, as well as the many organizations and structures that make the function of our society smooth and well ordered. Culture provides us with ideas, ideals, and values to lead a decent life. Self-restraint in conduct, consideration for the feelings of others, for the rights of others are the highest marks of culture. A cultural heritage means all the aspects of values of culture transmitted to human beings by their ancestors to the next generation. Architectural creations, monuments, material artifacts, the intellectual achievements, philosophy, pleasure of knowledge, scientific inventions and discoveries are all parts of our heritage.